Richard Nixon. He was one of the most controversial presidents in the history of the United States, and the first president to resign in the middle of a term. He was the man who covered up the Watergate scandal and was almost impeached for it as he resigned before the vote. But this was a man who did many great things too in his years as president. Among them was his visit to China and the restoration of communication between the two countries.
The story starts here, with the 国共内战, the Chinese Civil War, a massive military conflict between two parties locked in a power struggle. The Communist Chinese Party, which wanted to establish a communist government to replace the current one, and the party that held power at the time, the KMT, the Nationalist Party. When the war was finally over in 1949, the Communist Party came out victorious, forcing the Nationalist Party and the Republic of China to flee to the island of Formosa, now known as Taiwan. This was not good for the United States, which had sided with the KMT, the losing side of the war. As a result, Chairman Mao Zedong and the newly established People's Republic of China completely severed all relations with the U.S. For over 20 years, the U.S. and China had no diplomatic contact, including trade and communication with Communist China. President Nixon first began explorations on improving relations with the People's Republic of China by establishing a secret path of communication through Pakistani President Yahya Khan. By late 1970, the U.S. had expressed their interest in higher-level discussions about the two nations' foreign relations through the secret channel. Then came what is now known as ping-pong diplomacy. The ping-pong match in the International Ping-Pong Tournament where Chinese and American sports teams met face-to-face for the first time since the 国共内战. Guided by the hands of the United States and China, the fateful ping-pong match occurred in April 1971. It was the first time in over 20 years that the American and Chinese teams had met face-to-face. It was the first public view of re-engaging relations between the two nations, and it led to many others. On February 21st, 1972, Richard Nixon stepped off of an airplane in Beijing, sitting in one of the few countries that had no official contact with the United States. This was a bold step, a U.S. president's first encounter with the Chinese in mainland China. After taking his first steps on that isolated land, Nixon went up to Zhou Enlai, the prime minister, and shook his hand, a symbolic moment of peace. Nixon later recalled that Enlai said as they shook hands, "Your handshake came over the vastest distance in the world." 25 years of no communication. On that first day in China, relationships started to heal almost immediately, as Mao Zedong requested an unplanned visit to talk with Nixon. Nixon and Kissinger immediately rushed to Mao's residence, where Mao met with them. As they started a casual discussion, Mao said to Nixon as they talked about politics in Asia, "All these troublesome topics I don't want to get into very much. I think your topic is better, philosophic questions." And so Richard Nixon, the President of the United States, and Mao Zedong, the founder of the Chinese Party that fought against the United States, made peace with one another despite the enemies they were in the past. This surprise meeting was one of the key stops that drew the support of the citizens of China, for Mao was like a wise old father to them, and if Mao approved, then so did they. However, the meeting was best summed up with a quote directly from the document itself. The two sides expressed the hope that the gains achieved during this visit would open up new prospects for the relations between the two countries. They believe that the normalization of relations between the two countries is not only in the interest of the Chinese and American peoples, but also contributes to the relaxation of tension in Asia and the world.
Overall, Richard Nixon's exploration of new relations with China in the 1970s was a major landmark in the history of both nations. This exchange of diplomacy helped reduce tensions between the countries, which had not diplomatically communicated with each other for over 20 years. The encounter changed the relationship between world powers and led to a revolutionary new exchange of goods and ideas between the nations, which truly changed the world.